Hello everyone, I'm Mr. Ahmed and today I'm going to be your science teacher for our science lesson. Today we are going to talk about hormones. But before I start, I just want to ask you a quick question. Have you ever heard about hormones? Don't rush and answer me. I will give you 5 seconds to think. You didn't hear about it before? Never mind, I will tell you. But before I tell you, I just want to remind you for something. We learned from the previous studies that the nervous system organizes and coordinates most of the function and the activities of the living organisms. But scientists, through their researches and experiments, proved that there is another form of organizing and coordinating of these functions and activities. This form is performed by chemical substances and secreted by special cells in the body. This secretion is known as hormones. So now we can define that hormones are a chemical substances or a chemical messages that controls and organize most of the function and the activities in the living organisms. But from which cell hormones can be secreted? Actually, hormones can be secreted from special cells in the body. And these special cells are known as endocrine glands. So, the special cell that secretes hormone in our body is known as endocrine gland. And actually, it has another name which is known as a ductless gland. A ductless gland. So now we can define that endocrine gland, they are the cells that secretes the hormones in the blood without passing through a duct. So they are the cells. But what do we mean by a ductless? Actually, a ductless means no tube. So there won't be any need for the endocrine gland to send their secretion inside the tube, but it will just spread their secretion directly in the blood without passing through any tube or any duct. So now we can consider that blood is the only way for the endocrine gland to send their secretion and to be able to reach to their sites of action. But what do we mean by sites of action? Sites of actions, they are the cells that the hormone will affect in. Great. Do site of action has another name? Yes, it has. What is name? Its name is a target cell. A target cell. So now we can consider that we have a sender and we have a receiver. The sender here will be, of course, the endocrine gland because it secretes the endocrine gland because it secretes what? It secretes the hormones. And we have a receiver, and the receiver here will be the target cell. Why it will be the receiver? Because it receives what? It receives the hormones to affect in it. Great. So now we can consider, as I said, we have what? We have the sender, and the sender here is the endocrine gland. And the endocrine gland, which secretes what? Which secretes the hormones, will secrete their hormones directly in the blood. If you look at here, you won't see any tube, so it will just spread their secretion inside what? Inside the blood. And the hormones will try to travel with the blood. And when it travels with the blood, he will try to reach to their sites of action or to reach to their target cell, which it will affect what? It will affect in. So we can define now that the target cell are what? Are the cells that the hormone affect. And they are almost located away from the endocrine gland. That what? That secretes the hormone. That secretes what? That secretes the hormones. Great. Here's another picture for how the mechanisms that hormones can be able to reach to their sites of action. Here is what? Here is the hormone, and the hormone travels with the blood, and he tried to reach to their target cell to what? To affect in. Great. Now we have a quick exercise. He tell me what? Choose the correct answer. He says, the what is the only way for hormones to reach to their sites of action? Great. Let's remember, what is the only way for hormones to be able to reach to their sites of action? Is it enzyme? Of course not. Is it lymph? Of course not. Is it the blood? Of course the blood, because I said that the blood is considered the only way for what? The only way for the endocrine glands to be able to send their secretion, which is hormones. So now we will consider that the blood is the only what? The only way for the hormones to be able to reach to their sites of action. Great. Now we are going to talk about the most important endocrine gland in our body. Actually, endocrine gland has a lot of glands in our body. But in this lesson, we are going to talk about 5 of them. Great. Let's start with the first endocrine gland that we have in our lesson today. The first endocrine gland is called pituitary gland. Pituitary gland. Great. What about the second one? Second one is known as a thyroid gland. A thyroid gland. Great. And the third one is known as 2 adrenal glands. The 2 adrenal glands. And we also have a pancreas gland. A pancreas gland. And we also have the reproductive glands, which exist in male and exist in female. Great. But before I start with the first endocrine gland that we have in our lesson today, I just want to tell you a quick problem. Sometimes a problem or an issue occurs to what? Occurs to the endocrine gland, which force it to increase their secretion or even to decrease their secretion. Great. This problem is known as a hormone disorder. A hormone disorder. So we can define that hormone disorder is the increase or the decrease in the secretion of one of the hormones. When the endocrine gland that secretes the hormone doesn't work properly. Doesn't work what? Doesn't work properly. So that's about the hormone what? The hormone disorder. Great. Now let's start with the first endocrine gland that we have in our lesson today. The first endocrine gland that we have in our lesson today is known as pituitary glands. Pituitary glands. We are going to talk about its description, its secretion, and its location and its importance. Great. Let's start with its description. Actually, it's a small-sized gland in the size of pea seeds, and it consists of 2 loops. That's about its description. But what about its location? Actually, it's located below the brain. If we look at this picture, we will see that this small gland, which is known as pituitary gland, exists below what? Below the brain. So that's about the location of the pituitary gland. But what about its importance? Actually, endocrine gland secretes the hormones. The hormones what? The hormones that regulate most of the activities of the other endocrine gland. So scientists called pituitary gland as the master gland or the main gland, because as I said, it secretes most of the hormones that affect of the other endocrine gland. Great. So that's about the importance of the endocrine gland. Great. What about the secretion? Actually, each loop of the 2 loops of the pituitary glands secretes a different group of what? A different group of hormones. Great. So now we are going to talk about the hormones that's secreted by the pituitary gland. Actually, pituitary gland secretes a lot of hormones. Let's start with the first one. The first pituitary gland that the hormones that pituitary gland secretes it is known as growth hormone. Growth hormone. That's about the first hormone. What about the second one? Second one is known as a thyroid stimulating hormone. Great. What about the third one? The third one is known as the 2 adrenal gland activating hormone. Do we have another hormones? Of course, we have a lot. We also have a mammary gland activating hormone, which plays an important role during the breastfeeding. And we also have a sex organs activating hormone, which plays also an important role during the growth and the development of sex organs. And we also have the hormones that regulate the amount of water inside our body. And finally, we have a hormone which is known as a facilitating hormone during what? During delivery. Let's start with the first hormone that we have in our lesson today. The first hormone that the pituitary gland secretes it is known as growth hormone. A growth hormone. Great. So let's see the importance of growth hormone. Actually, growth hormone control the growth rate of what? Of the bones and the muscles and the other organs. So we can say that the growth hormone is determine what? Is determine the height that the person will be when he becomes what? When he becomes a fully grown. So growth hormone plays an important role that determines the height that the person will reach when he becomes a fully grown. Great. Do you remember the problem or the issues that I told you before? That sometimes an issue or a problem occurs to the endocrine gland, which force them to increase their secretion or even to decrease the secretion. This problem or this issue occurs to the pituitary gland. So sometimes the pituitary gland has a problem which increase their secretion. But which hormone will be secreted with a large amount or even with a small amount? Actually, it will be the growth hormone. Great. So sometimes growth hormone secreted by a large amount and sometimes secreted by small amount. Great. If it secreted by or secreted with a large amount, it will cause a disease which is known as a gigantism. And it's even secreted with a small amount, it will cause another disease which is known as a dwarfism. Which is known as what? A dwarfism. Great. Let's differentiate between them. Here is the dwarfism, the first disease that occurs to the pituitary gland, and also the gigantism. Great. Let's see the reason. Dwarfism is caused by the decrease in secretion of the growth hormone during what? During the childhood. And gigantism, it's the reason that there is an increase in the secretion of the growth hormone, but with a large amount during what? During the childhood. Great. But what about the symptoms of these diseases? Actually, the symptoms of the dwarfism is that the person stops growing. So the person stops growing. So the person becomes what? So the person becomes a dwarf. But the symptoms of what? Of the gigantism is there is a continuous growth in the limbs. So the person becomes a giant. Becomes what? Becomes a giant. Great. So that's about the hormone disorder that occurs to the growth hormone. Great. Let's go to the second endocrine gland that we have in our lesson today. The second one, let's think about it. It's known as what? It's known as a thyroid gland. A thyroid gland. We also are going to talk about its description and its secretion and its importance. Great. Let's start with what? Let's start with its description. Actually, endocrine gland. Great. As we said, we have a lot of endocrine glands. Which thyroid gland is one of them? Great. Let's talk about its description. Thyroid gland consists of two loops, which are linked together with a small what? With a small part. Great. What about its location? Actually, it locates in the front of the neck, on the both side of what? On the both side of trachea. What about secretion? Thyroid gland secretes two hormones. First hormone is known as a thyroxine hormone, and the other one is known as a calcitonin hormone. A calcitonin hormone. Now we're going to differentiate between the thyroxine hormone and the calcitonin hormone. Let's start with the calcitonin hormone. Actually, the calcitonin hormone, it's important that it controls what? It controls the level of calcium inside the blood. So that's the main rule or the main important for the calcitonin hormone. But what about the thyroxine hormone? Actually, thyroxine hormone is a very important hormone in our body. Why? Because it plays an important role during what? During a process known as a food assimilation. And this process which liberates the energy required for the human body from where? From the food. So of course it plays an important role. Great. Now we are going to talk about the structure of the thyroxine hormone. Actually, it enters a main component inside what? Inside the thyroxine hormone structure. This main component is known as iodine. And iodine enters or exists inside food. So, if the food doesn't exist iodine, there will be a leakage. A leakage in what? Leakage in the thyroxine hormone secretion. Because the main component doesn't exist. Of course, there won't be the thyroxine hormone. Great. So we should what? We should eat food that contains iodine. or iodine. Why? Because it enters the main structure of what? The main structure of the thyroxine hormone. Thyroxine what? The thyroxine hormone. Great. Here is a picture for what? For the thyroid gland, which, as we said, it consists of two parts and linked together with a small part. Great. Do you remember the problem or the issue that occurs to the pituitary gland? It also occurs to the thyroid gland. How? Sometimes there is an issue or a problem occurs to the thyroid gland, which increase or just decrease the secretion of the thyroxine hormone. Great. If there is an increase in the secretion of the thyroxine hormone, it will cause a disease. So let's talk about the disorders that occurs to the thyroxine hormone. Sometimes thyroxine hormone secretes with a large amount and sometimes with a small amount. If the thyroxine hormone secretes with a large amount, it will cause a disease known as exophthalmic goiter. And if the thyroxine hormone secretes with a small amount, it will cause a disease which is known as a simple goiter. Simple goiter. Great. Let's differentiate between them. Here is the exophthalmic goiter, and here is the simple goiter. Let's start with the simple goiter. Simple goiter, it's reason because there is a decrease in the secretion of the thyroxine hormone. But due to what? Due to the leakage of iodine which exists inside the food. Why iodine particularly? Because we said that the iodine is considered the main component of the thyroxine hormone. That's why there is a decrease in the thyroxine hormone. Great. What about the symptoms of this disease? Actually, there will be an enlargement on what? An enlargement on the neck, accompanied with an enlargement with the trachea. So you will see that the neck of this patient will be like this. There is an enlargement inside its neck. Great. That's about simple goiter. But what about the exophthalmic goiter? Actually, exophthalmic goiter, it's a disease, and it is caused by the increase in the secretion of the thyroxine hormone, but with a large amount. Great. What about its symptoms? Actually, there is a lot of symptoms of this disease. First, there is an enlargement on the neck, accompanied with an enlargement with what? With the trachea, accompanied with loss of weight, tension, and exophthalmosis. What do you mean by exophthalmosis? The person that has this disease, you will notice that he's staring at you with a tough looking, just like this picture. So, if you watch a person staring at you with a tough looking, don't be worried because he is a patient. So you have to forgive him. Great. So that's about what? That's about the two diseases that occurs to what? Occurs to the thyroid gland. Great. Now we are going to talk about the third gland that we have in our lesson today. And the third gland, which is known as what? Which is known as the two adrenal gland. The two adrenal glands. Great. We are going to talk about its location and its importance. Great. Let's start with its location. Two adrenal glands are located above the kidney, but it's adhering above the kidney. It's linked above what? Above the kidney. Great. And its secretion. Actually, the two adrenal glands secretes a very famous hormone, which is known as adrenaline. Of course, you heard about adrenaline before. So, here's the location of what? Here's the location of the the adrenal gland, the adrenal gland. Great. Let's talk about the importance of the adrenal hormone. Adrenal hormone plays an important role during where? During what? During the emergency cases. Emergency cases like fear or emotion or anger. So, if you service to these actions or to this emergency, the adrenaline hormone will be secreted with a large amount. To what? To stimulate your body organs to what? To respond to this emergency. Great. Now we reach to the question time. The first question said that choose the correct answer. He said, which gland secretes facilitating hormone during delivery? Let's make a quick revision. The gland or the endocrine gland that secretes what? That secretes the facilitating hormone were known as what? Were known as the pituitary gland. Of course, because we have a lot of hormones that pituitary gland secretes it. Great. So the gland that secretes the facilitating hormone will be what? Will be the pituitary gland. The pituitary gland. Great. Let's move to the second question. He also said choose the correct answer. The hormone which regulates what? Regulates the level of calcium. Let's make a quick revision. Whose hormone that controls what? Controls the level of calcium in our body. Of course, it will be the calcitonin hormone. So the calcitonin hormone is the hormone that controls the level of calcium in our body. Great. The third question says, which hormone liberates means release. Release what? Release the needed energy from food. Okay. He said, is it estrogen? Of course not. Is it calcitonin? No. We said that calcitonin controls the level of calcium in our body. Great. Is it growth hormone? Of course not, because growth hormone control the growth rate of our limbs. Is it thyroxine hormone? Of course it will be the thyroxine hormone. Why? Because we said that thyroxine hormone controls what? Controls the process which is known as a food assimilation. A food what? Assimilation. Great. That's all what we have for our science lesson today. You are with Mr. Ahmed Samir. Thanks for listening. I hope you enjoy it.